The hum of the city outside my apartment was muted, almost polite, as if it knew I was trying to steal a few quiet minutes to myself. I sat on the edge of my cream sofa, silk blouse slightly wrinkled from a morning of meetings, fingers drumming against the smooth fabric. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, and I flinched, because every time it did, I braced for a reminder of what I'd survived, what I'd fought for. I glanced out the floor-to-ceiling window. The skyline glittered like someone had shaken a jar of stars over the city, and for a moment, I let myself feel normal, successful, composed, engaged even. Life looked perfect from the outside. But the truth lingered like a shadow in the corners of my apartment. My family had tried to steal my $52,000 trust fund on what was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, my engagement dinner. The memory hit me again, the laughter in the room, the clinking of glasses, my heart pounding as my mother casually mentioned the money. How could anyone be so brazen? How could they not see the betrayal hanging in the air like smoke? I remembered the trembling in my hands, the sharp sting of disbelief in my chest. A soft chime from my phone yanked me back. A message from my lawyer. They've contacted us again. Time to act. I took a slow breath, letting the silk cool against my skin. Hurt. Pride. Resilience. And yes, a touch of irony. After all, this was the same family that had tried to control me, thinking I'd fold. Little did they know how far I'd come. It was a warm June evening, the kind where the air feels sticky against your skin but the light makes everything look golden. I had spent hours getting ready for my engagement dinner, anticipating smiles, congratulations, and the kind of love that only comes with family gathered around you. My hair fell in soft waves over my shoulders, my dress clinging just enough to feel elegant without screaming for attention. I felt excited, hopeful, naive, maybe. But the moment I walked into the dining room, the energy shifted. My father's gaze lingered too long on my hands, my mother's smile was slightly too tight, and my older brother hovered at the edge, shifting his weight impatiently. I laughed nervously at my fiancé's joke, trying to mask the flicker of unease crawling up my spine. Then it happened. My mother's voice, sweet as syrup, slid across the table. So, about that trust fund of yours. I hope you've thought about how to use it wisely. The words were calm, but they landed like hammers. My heart stopped mid-beat. I felt the lump in my throat, my hands growing clammy, my legs stiffening under the table. The room seemed to tilt, the cheerful chatter dimming into a silent trap. I tried to smile. I have plans, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. Plans weren't enough. They pressed. Subtle at first, then sharper, comments about how I owed them, how family comes first, how they deserve to share. Every syllable was a reminder. They saw me as a child to manipulate, not a woman to respect. I wanted to shrink into the chair, disappear, tell them to take whatever they wanted just to keep the peace. But something in me, a small spark, refused to die. That spark came from my grandmother, who had always whispered, "Stand tall, no matter how small they make you feel. Money, power, love, they're yours to guard, not theirs to take." I remembered her words as if she were beside me, pressing a hand to my shaking one. My eyes met my fiancé's under the chandelier light, and I saw the trust, the hope, the quiet encouragement. By the end of that night, I made a decision. I wouldn't hand over a cent, not to please them, not to avoid conflict. I would fight, alone if I had to. And in that choice, I felt the first stirrings of independence, a dangerous, thrilling, terrifying independence that would eventually carry me far beyond that dining room. After that night, I couldn't just sit and hope things would resolve themselves. I pored over every document I could find about the trust fund, spoke to lawyers in hushed tones, and began quietly mapping out a plan. The thrill of independence mingled with a gnawing fear. I was stepping into unknown territory, and my family's shadow lingered behind me. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them win. I found a mentor in someone I least expected, Madeline Carter, a seasoned financial advisor in Manhattan, whose reputation for helping young women manage wealth was legendary. She saw my potential before I even fully believed in it myself. "You're not a victim. she said during our first meeting. You're a strategist. And strategists don't fold. Her words became a lifeline. The next months were a blur of late nights and early mornings. I taught myself to read contracts, to understand investment portfolios, to navigate legal jargon that had once felt like an alien language. Some nights, I lay awake, heart hammering, questioning whether I was strong enough to stand against my family's expectations. But each small victory, clarifying a clause in the trust fund, securing my first profitable investment, earning the respect of my mentor, built a quiet confidence. I kept my progress carefully hidden. Family calls were met with casual updates. Everything's fine, I said, masking the storm of accomplishment within me. Social media? Barely a mention of the milestones I was quietly achieving. I was building something that belonged entirely to me, far away from judgment or greed. By the time the next summer rolled around, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My portfolio had grown beyond what I had hoped, and I had cultivated a sense of self-respect that no one could take from me. I could walk into a room and feel steady in my own power, the memory of that engagement dinner fueling rather than haunting me. I realized the irony wasn't lost on me. My family had tried to push me down, to take what was mine, and yet they had inadvertently forced me to become unstoppable. Every sleepless night, every whispered word of doubt, every challenge I faced alone had shaped me into a woman who could now stand in her truth, without flinching. And still, a part of me savored the quiet. The world saw a composed, modest young woman, engaged and polite, perhaps even unremarkable. But beneath the surface, I was a force they could never have anticipated. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and nervous energy, a faint trace of coffee lingering from the morning rush. I smoothed my blazer, felt the fabric settle over my shoulders, and reminded myself to breathe. Today was the day I would face them, the very people who had tried to take what was mine. My family, my parents, my older brother. They expected to see hesitation, fear, maybe even tears. What they didn't expect was me. I walked in first, letting the weight of the room and its quiet authority settle around me. When they arrived, their smiles were polite but wary, tinged with suspicion. They glanced at the empty chair beside me and at the documents stacked neatly on the table, but no one spoke. I let the silence stretch, watched their eyes flicker between the judge, me, and the evidence. When the proceedings began, I presented my case with calm precision. Each document was a brick in the wall I had been building for months, each clause a shield against manipulation. I spoke clearly, my voice steady, confident, firm enough to make them listen, undeniable enough to make them squirm. Then came the moment that truly shifted the power. This trust fund, I said, placing the folder on the table so everyone could see it, is not a family favor. It is my legal right. Any attempt to coerce or manipulate me into surrendering it is not only unethical, it is unlawful. The room went still. My parents' eyes widened. My brother's jaw tightened. My lawyer, standing beside me, gave a subtle nod. I could feel my own heartbeat, steady now, not the trembling from that engagement dinner years ago. I revealed the hidden victories of the past year. The growth of the fund, the meticulous documentation of every attempt they had made to interfere, and the legal steps I had already taken to protect myself. Every word landed like a small hammer, chiseling away at their confidence. For the first time, I saw disbelief, guilt, shame, and awe flicker across their faces. The mother who had smiled while mentioning my fund could not meet my gaze. My father, ever the authoritative figure, sat frozen, as if realizing that the child he had underestimated was now the woman in command. And my brother, who had hovered with quiet entitlement, finally understood that I was untouchable in this domain. By the time the judge called the day's session, the power had shifted entirely. I had not just defended my money, I had reclaimed my dignity. They had come thinking I would fold, thinking I would plead, and instead, I had shown them a woman who was not only prepared to fight but prepared to win. When we walked out of the courtroom, the sunlight felt different, sharper, cleaner. I could almost hear my grandmother's words whispering in my mind. Stand tall. I had done more than stand tall. I had soared. And this time, no one could bring me down. After the courtroom victory, the dynamic with my family changed instantly. They had come expecting a frightened, pliable version of me, and instead, they were faced with someone who had authority over her own life and assets. The shift was palpable. My confidence filled the room like sunlight pouring through high windows, and they could do nothing but adjust to it. I decided to speak clearly, deliberately, setting the terms for any future relationship. I'm willing to rebuild a connection, I said, my voice steady, calm, and unmistakably firm. But it has to be on my terms. No more manipulation. No more expectations that I surrender my autonomy. If you want to be part of my life, there are conditions. My mother's lips pressed together, my father's arms crossed, my brother's gaze flicked nervously toward the floor. But I didn't falter. I outlined each expectation clearly. Respect boundaries, acknowledge past mistakes without excuses, and focus on personal growth rather than entitlement. If they wanted forgiveness, they had to show effort, not entitlement. I told them they had to stop viewing my accomplishments as threats. My success wasn't a reflection of their failure. It was the result of my persistence, my intelligence, and my hard work. They needed to embrace their own paths instead of trying to claim mine. Every condition I set was rooted not in vengeance, but in teaching accountability, nurturing trust, and fostering change. Some resisted immediately, anger flashing in their eyes. Others hesitated, caught between pride and the reality of the life they had tried to control. I could see the weight of recognition settling in slowly. They understood that I had won not just the fund, but the narrative. Even in my firmness, I offered compassion. I care about you, I said. But care without respect is meaningless. You can't dictate my life anymore, and that's the line we cannot cross. Honor it, or accept the consequences. It wasn't easy to enforce these boundaries, and I knew it. But I had learned over months of solitude, legal battles, and careful planning that true power lies in clarity and courage, not in blind confrontation. I had found my strength by standing alone, and now I was choosing to extend it as a bridge for those willing to cross it with integrity. By the end of that week, some of the first subtle changes began. My mother paused before commenting on my decisions, my father listened without interrupting, and my brother approached me not with demands, but with tentative questions about my work. It was slow, but it was real, the first signs of a family learning to respect the woman I had become. Months later, life felt lighter, yet fuller in ways I hadn't imagined. Some family members drifted away, choosing distance over change, and that was okay. Others began to show glimpses of growth, small, honest attempts to respect boundaries and acknowledge my accomplishments, without resentment. It was not perfect, and I knew it never would be, but it was progress, and for the first time, I realized that my own peace mattered more than anyone's approval. I often sat in my apartment, the same one where I had reflected before facing them in court, and looked at the little reminders of my journey. A framed photo of my grandmother rested on the bookshelf, her gentle smile frozen in time. I traced her words in my memory. Stand tall, no matter how small they make you feel. I had done more than stand tall. I had claimed my life, my money, and my dignity, and I had done it without losing my sense of self. The trust fund, once a source of tension and attempted manipulation, had become a symbol, not of wealth, but of my independence. Every decision I had made, every step I had taken to protect it, had shaped me into a woman who could navigate challenges without fear. I realized that empowerment wasn't just about winning battles. It was about setting boundaries, honoring oneself, and offering compassion without compromise. Even my engagement felt different now. My fiancé watched me with quiet admiration, knowing the strength I had cultivated through months of struggle. Our relationship had matured alongside my independence. Love, I realized, was not about surrendering your power. It was about standing together as equals, each supporting the other's growth. I held the symbolic object my grandmother had given me, the small silver locket she had pressed into my hand years ago, a reminder to trust myself. I ran my fingers over its smooth surface, thinking about how far I had come since the night my family tried to steal what was mine. And I smiled quietly to myself because in the end, I had more than money or a legal victory. I had freedom, respect, and the confidence that no one, not even the people I loved most, could take my life from me again. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, a private truth that felt like the culmination of every hard-won lesson. They tried to steal my $52,000 trust fund at my engagement dinner, but I took back everything that really mattered.